For weeks now, one question has continued to echo through every conversation about Nolan Wells. What really happened during those final moments? Was the distress call simply a desperate plea for help? Or has the public been listening to a version of that recording that sounds very different from the one investigators first received? Now another topic has entered the conversation: the autopsy. Not because it suddenly answers every question, it doesn't, but because when people began comparing what is publicly known about the autopsy with the growing debate surrounding the enhanced audio, many realized something important. These are two completely different pieces of the puzzle, yet many online discussions have started blending them together. That has left thousands of people wondering where the facts end and where assumptions begin. Today, we're taking a careful look at both. We're separating verified information from internet theories, and we're asking whether the phrase many people are using, the truth about enhanced audio, actually points us closer to understanding Nolan Wells' case, or whether it raises even more questions. If you've followed this investigation from the beginning, stay with me, because some of the most important details are often the ones that receive the least attention. Before we go any further, if you've been following the Nolan Wells case from the beginning, I'd love for you to become part of this community. Every week we go through the documents, the interviews, and the verified updates together, instead of chasing every rumor online. If that's the kind of reporting you appreciate, subscribe now, because there are still several developments in this case we'll be covering as they become public. Like many of you watching today, I have spent countless hours reading official statements, reviewing publicly available reports, listening to interviews, and following developments as they've unfolded. One thing has become very clear. This case has never lacked attention. What it has lacked are definitive answers. Every time a new discussion appears online, thousands of people rush to see whether this will finally explain what happened. Sometimes those updates contain genuinely new information. Other times, they simply revisit evidence that has already been discussed from a different angle. The conversation surrounding the enhanced distress call falls somewhere in between. According to publicly available information, recordings connected to Nolan Wells' final known moments have circulated widely online. Over time, multiple creators uploaded their own enhanced versions, each claiming to make the audio clearer in different ways. Some removed background noise, others amplified voices. Still others used artificial intelligence to isolate sounds they believed listeners should pay closer attention to. That immediately sparked debate. One listener would insist they heard a particular word, another heard something completely different. Someone else heard nothing unusual at all. If you've ever listened to an old cassette tape from years ago, you'll understand the challenge. Sometimes cleaning up the recording helps. Other times, cleaning it too much changes the way it sounds. That is why professional forensic audio experts generally compare every enhanced version against the untouched original rather than relying on the processed copy alone. According to the material you've shared, investigators have not publicly confirmed that the enhanced versions circulating online represent official investigative evidence. That distinction matters. It may sound like a technical point, but in a criminal investigation, it can make all the difference. Meanwhile, another conversation quietly continued in the background: the autopsy. Whenever people hear that word, they naturally expect certainty. An autopsy can provide valuable medical information. It may explain injuries. It may identify medical conditions. It may help establish a timeline. But many people mistakenly believe an autopsy automatically answers every question surrounding a case. Experienced investigators know it rarely works that way. Instead, an autopsy becomes one piece of a much larger investigation. It is compared with witness statements, phone records, location data, search efforts, digital evidence, and everything investigators learn afterward. That brings us to something many viewers may not have considered. Although social media often presents the enhanced audio and the autopsy as though they are directly connected, publicly available information has not established that one confirms the other. Instead, each contributes different kinds of information. One concerns what people believe they hear. The other concerns medical findings and investigative analysis. Those are very different conversations. Yet online, they've increasingly become intertwined. That would have been the end of it, but another detail stood out. As more enhanced versions appeared online, viewers began asking an entirely different question. Not, what do you hear? But, can we trust what we're hearing? That question changed everything about the public discussion. Researchers who study speech perception have long pointed out that once listeners are told what they are supposed to hear, many begin hearing exactly that, even when the original recording remains unclear. That's one reason forensic specialists document every enhancement step carefully. Think back to those television mysteries many of us watched years ago. Investigators would replay grainy surveillance footage again and again. Sometimes a viewer spotted something everyone else had missed. Other times, people became convinced they saw details that simply weren't there. Technology has improved dramatically since then. Human nature has not. We all want clarity, especially in a case as heartbreaking as this one. That desire makes every new upload feel important. Every headline promising, "Listen again." Every thumbnail claiming, "New audio revealed." Every video suggesting hidden clues have finally been uncovered. But according to the material available, officials have not publicly announced that the widely shared enhanced recordings should replace the original evidence used during the investigation. That's an important reminder. The loudest version isn't always the official one, and sometimes the most dramatic headline isn't the most accurate. Which brings us back to today's central question. What is the truth about enhanced audio? Perhaps the answer isn't found in discovering new words hidden inside the recording. Perhaps it's understanding what audio enhancement can and cannot do. Experts generally explain that enhancement may reduce background noise or improve intelligibility, but it cannot reliably recover information that was never captured in the original recording. Some forms of aggressive processing can even introduce artifacts, digital effects that sound meaningful without actually representing new evidence. Imagine restoring a faded family photograph. A skilled artist can sharpen the image. They can brighten it, remove scratches, correct fading. But if the original photograph never captured someone's eye color, no software can honestly recreate it. Audio works much the same way. That simple comparison helps explain why investigators remain cautious, careful, methodical. They know every conclusion must eventually stand up to independent verification. Not internet popularity, not viral clips, verification. And that's exactly why so many experienced investigators continue examining every category of evidence together rather than relying on a single recording. Publicly discussed information indicates detectives have been comparing digital records, witness accounts, physical evidence, and timelines as the investigation continues. If you've been following Nolan's story from the beginning, you've probably noticed how quickly discussions move online. One day the focus is on phone records, the next it's on social media activity. Then it's the enhanced recording. After that, attention shifts back to the autopsy. The public conversation rarely stands still. Investigations, however, move much more slowly. That can be frustrating. Families want answers, friends want answers, communities want answers. Everyone watching from home wants answers. But history has shown that rushing to conclusions often creates more confusion than clarity. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the quiet work that never makes headlines, reviewing timelines, re-interviewing witnesses, comparing digital records, looking for one detail that doesn't fit. Those aren't glamorous tasks, but they have solved countless investigations over the years. As we continue following Nolan Wells' case, perhaps one of the most meaningful things we can do is separate verified information from assumptions. That doesn't lessen public interest. If anything, it strengthens it. Because when facts eventually emerge, they're much easier to recognize if we haven't allowed speculation to replace evidence. Before we continue into the next part of this story, I'd like to hear from you. Our community has grown into people from all across the country and around the world who genuinely care about seeking truth and supporting families waiting for answers. So tell us where you're watching from. Many viewers have been sharing messages like, Texas stands for justice for Nolan Wells. Chicago stands for justice for Nolan Wells. The UK stands for justice for Nolan Wells. Or wherever you're joining us from. I'd love to see just how far this community reaches. And while you're in the comments, let me ask you one thoughtful question. Do you believe the enhanced audio has helped the public better understand this case? Or do you think too much attention has shifted away from the broader investigation? There isn't a right or wrong answer. Just remember to keep the conversation respectful. Many families connected to cases like this read public discussions, and respectful conversations often help everyone focus on facts rather than assumptions. One thing I really appreciate about this community is that many of you have been here since the very first Nolan Wells update. You've helped point out publicly available documents, shared respectful perspectives, and kept the conversation focused on facts. If you're watching but haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you with us before the next update. Because coming up next, we'll turn away from the audio itself and examine how the investigation's timeline and several publicly discussed inconsistencies have kept people asking new questions about Nolan Wells's final known movements. By the time the debate over the enhanced audio reached its peak, something interesting had begun to happen. People were no longer asking only what they could hear. They were asking whether they had been focusing on the wrong piece of the investigation all along. At first, that seemed like a surprising shift. After all, the distress call had become one of the most talked about pieces of evidence connected to Nolan Wells. Every time a new cleaned-up version appeared online, thousands of people rushed to compare it with the last one. Some were convinced a hidden phrase had finally been uncovered. Others believed the newest version sounded almost identical to earlier uploads. The more versions that appeared, the more divided opinions became. And that raises an important question. If 5 different creators produce 5 different enhanced recordings, which one should people trust? The honest answer is that, based on publicly available information, there is no indication that investigators have endorsed the widely circulated internet versions as official evidence. That doesn't necessarily mean those recordings are useless. It simply means viewers should be careful not to mistake a creator's interpretation for a verified investigative finding. That distinction is easy to lose sight of when dramatic headlines promise certainty. It is much harder to remember when you're listening for something you desperately hope will provide an answer. Something else also deserves attention. Several individuals with experience in audio production have publicly explained that aggressive enhancement can sometimes make ordinary sounds seem more meaningful than they actually are. Background noise can become sharper. Wind can resemble speech. Mechanical sounds can begin to mimic words. Software may emphasize frequencies that were always present, while also introducing digital artifacts that listeners interpret as voices. None of that automatically means someone intentionally misled viewers. It simply illustrates the limitations of the technology itself. Imagine standing outside during a heavy rainstorm. Someone across the street calls your name. You aren't quite sure what they said. Now imagine listening to a recording of that moment after someone has filtered out the rain, boosted certain frequencies, and increased the volume. You might hear more clearly, or you might hear something your brain naturally tries to complete. That is one reason forensic specialists typically preserve every version of a recording, including the untouched original. Improving clarity is one thing, changing perception is another. That brings us back to Nolan Wells. While millions of online views focused almost entirely on the recording, investigators were reportedly examining something much broader: phone records, digital location information, witness interviews, search efforts, physical evidence, vehicle movements, timelines. Each one represents another layer of the investigation, and investigators rarely rely upon one piece of evidence standing alone. Instead, they ask whether every piece fits together. Does one witness's account match available phone data? Does a reported timeline align with digital records? Do multiple independent sources point toward the same conclusion? Those are the kinds of questions investigators work through, often quietly and patiently, long after public attention has moved to the next headline. That pace can feel frustrating. Weeks become months. Months feel even longer. Meanwhile, families continue waiting. Friends continue hoping. Communities continue asking questions. But experienced detectives have often said that solving difficult investigations usually depends less on dramatic discoveries and more on patiently verifying one fact after another. Then another discussion began gaining momentum: artificial intelligence. Only a few years ago, restoring poor quality audio required specialized equipment and considerable training. Today, almost anyone can upload a recording into an AI-powered application that promises to reveal hidden voices within minutes. That accessibility has obvious benefits. Old family recordings can become easier to hear. Historic speeches can be restored. Damaged interviews may become more understandable. But the same technology also creates new challenges. Some AI systems don't merely remove unwanted sounds. They estimate what unclear speech might have been. That difference matters enormously. An estimate is not the same thing as preserved evidence. It is one reason forensic laboratories generally compare processed files directly against the original source before drawing conclusions. Without that comparison, confidence becomes much harder to establish. And that is why many experienced observers continue urging patience in cases like Nolan Wells's. Meanwhile, another question quietly emerged. Who actually created the enhanced recording that received the most attention online? Surprisingly, that answer became difficult to pin down. Copies spread rapidly across social media. Videos were downloaded, edited again, uploaded elsewhere, sometimes reposted without identifying the original source. After enough sharing, tracing where a file first came from became almost impossible. That creates what investigators often describe as a chain of custody problem. If nobody can confidently explain where a digital file originated, or exactly how it changed over time, its value as evidence becomes much more limited. That principle doesn't apply only to this case. Across the country, investigators increasingly face similar questions involving edited videos, photographs, text messages, and audio recordings. Modern technology makes sharing information easier than ever. It also makes verifying authenticity more important than ever. Another overlooked detail deserves mention. When most people listen to a recording, they naturally focus on the voices. Investigators often pay just as much attention to everything surrounding those voices: a passing vehicle, running water, wind, birds, construction equipment, a closing door. Those environmental sounds sometimes help establish location, timing, or distance more reliably than partially understood speech. Former investigators discussing forensic audio in general have explained that background sounds can sometimes provide valuable context, even when spoken words remain difficult to understand. It's another reminder that evidence often tells its story in ways people don't immediately expect. Then something unexpected happened. Public conversation slowly began shifting away from the recording itself. Instead, attention returned to Nolan's final known movements. People started comparing timelines, looking at publicly discussed witness accounts, reviewing what had been reported about digital activity, searching for places where one piece of information appeared not to line up neatly with another. Whenever that happens during an investigation, detectives don't immediately assume someone is lying. Contradictions can arise for many reasons: stress, poor visibility, the passage of time, human memory. Two honest witnesses can remember the same event differently. That is why investigators search for patterns rather than relying upon a single inconsistency. One contradiction rarely solves a case. Several independent facts pointing in the same direction may eventually become much more significant. Throughout all of this, one truth has remained constant. The public desperately wants answers. That is completely understandable. Every new headline brings hope. Every official statement is carefully examined. Every rumor spreads quickly. But evidence doesn't become stronger because more people repeat it. It becomes stronger when it can be independently verified. That principle has guided investigations for generations, long before smartphones, long before artificial intelligence, long before enhanced audio became part of everyday conversation. And it remains just as important today. As we move closer to the next chapter of Nolan Wells' story, one thing becomes increasingly clear: the enhanced audio may continue generating discussion. The autopsy may continue raising questions, but neither exists in isolation. Investigators are working to understand the entire picture. That means fitting together medical findings, timelines, witness statements, digital evidence, and every other piece that can be verified independently. Only then can reliable conclusions begin to emerge. Before we continue, I'd like to ask another question that has led to some incredibly thoughtful discussions on this channel. When you follow a case like Nolan Wells's, what do you personally trust the most? Official investigative updates? Witness interviews? Digital evidence? Or do you think public analysis sometimes uncovers details that deserve closer attention? I'd genuinely like to hear your perspective. And if you're comfortable, don't forget to tell everyone where you're watching from. Seeing comments like "Florida stands for justice for Nolan Wells," "Canada stands for justice for Nolan Wells," or "Australia stands for justice for Nolan Wells," reminds us that people far beyond one community continue hoping for answers grounded in verified evidence. Thank you to everyone who contributes respectfully. This community has become a place where thoughtful discussion matters more than sensational claims, and that's because of all of you. In the final part, we'll look at the broader investigation, the questions that still remain unanswered publicly, and why investigators often guard key information until they believe the evidence can withstand careful scrutiny. We'll also reflect on what this case teaches us about balancing compassion, patience, and the search for truth. As we've followed this case together, one theme has appeared again and again. The loudest conversations are not always the ones that bring us closest to the truth. Sometimes they do. More often, they simply remind us how much people care. That certainly seems to be true in Nolan Wells's case. The enhanced audio has been replayed thousands of times. The autopsy has become the subject of countless discussions. Every public update has generated new theories. Yet despite all of that attention, the investigation itself continues to follow a much steadier course. Investigators are not trying to win an online debate. They're trying to establish facts that can withstand scrutiny. That difference may not sound exciting, but it is often what separates a solved case from one clouded by speculation. As of the publicly available information discussed throughout this video, authorities have not confirmed that the widely shared enhanced recordings circulating online represent the official version used in the investigation. Questions remain about how various online copies were processed and what evidentiary value they may ultimately have. Likewise, while the autopsy has generated public interest, officials have not announced that it, by itself, answers the central questions surrounding Nolan Wells' final moments. That may feel unsatisfying. After following this story for so long, many people naturally hope for one breakthrough that explains everything. History tells us that investigations rarely unfold that way. Instead, progress usually comes through dozens of smaller discoveries, one verified phone record, one witness whose timeline matches another, one overlooked detail that suddenly makes several pieces fit together. Those moments rarely become viral headlines, but they often become the foundation of a case. When experienced detectives talk about difficult investigations, they frequently describe them as assembling a puzzle. Every piece matters, but forcing the wrong piece into the puzzle doesn't make the picture clearer. It only creates more confusion. That comparison feels especially appropriate here. Some people remain convinced that the enhanced recording contains crucial information that has yet to be officially acknowledged. Others believe the recording has received far more attention than it deserves. Neither opinion changes the standard investigators must meet. Evidence has to be verified, it has to be authenticated, and it has to fit alongside everything else already known. That careful approach can sometimes feel frustrating from the outside, but it protects both the investigation and any future legal proceedings. Another lesson from this case reaches well beyond Nolan Wells. We are living through a time when technology is advancing at an extraordinary pace. Artificial intelligence can restore damaged photographs. It can improve poor quality recordings. It can imitate voices with remarkable accuracy. Those tools offer tremendous possibilities. They also require tremendous responsibility. The question is no longer simply whether technology can improve evidence. The question is whether we, as viewers, know the difference between enhancement and interpretation. That may become one of the defining challenges of modern investigations, not only for this case, but for countless others in the years ahead. One thing that has stood out throughout this investigation is the dedication shown by so many ordinary people. Individuals from every corner of the country, and even around the world, have continued following Nolan's story. Some have searched public records, others have shared verified news reports. Many have simply kept the conversation alive while hoping for answers. That kind of public interest can be meaningful. It reminds families that they are not forgotten. At the same time, compassion matters just as much as curiosity. Behind every headline is a real family, real friends, real lives forever changed by uncertainty. That is something worth remembering every time a new theory appears online. Perhaps that is why today's discussion has been less about proving one theory and more about understanding how evidence should be viewed. The phrase on today's thumbnail, "Truth about enhanced audio," it's an eye-catching statement. But after everything we've explored together, Perhaps the real truth isn't hidden inside one particular sound. Perhaps the truth is that enhanced audio is a tool, a useful one, sometimes an important one, but it is still only one part of a much larger investigation. The same can be said of the autopsy. It contributes valuable information. It raises important questions. Yet it works alongside every other piece of verified evidence rather than replacing them. When all those pieces are considered together, investigators move closer to understanding what happened. That process takes patience. It also takes discipline. As we wait for future public developments, there are still several questions that many people continue asking. Will investigators eventually release additional verified information? Will more details about Nolan's final known movements become public? Will future evidence help explain questions that remain unanswered today? Those answers simply are not available yet. And until they are, the most responsible approach is to separate confirmed information from assumption. Doing so doesn't lessen anyone's concern. In fact, it strengthens the search for truth. Before we wrap up, I'd like to ask one final favor. This community has become something special because people here genuinely care about respectful conversations. So if you're watching today, leave a comment telling everyone where you're watching from. I'd love to see messages like, Ohio stands for justice for Nolan Wells. California stands for justice for Nolan Wells. Scotland stands for justice for Nolan Wells, or wherever you call home. It's remarkable to see how one story can bring together people from different cities, states, and countries who all share the same hope, that verified evidence will one day provide the answers Nolan's loved ones deserve. And while you're there, I'd love to know your thoughts. After everything we've discussed today, do you believe the enhanced audio has helped public understanding of this case, or do you think the broader investigation deserves much more attention than the recording itself? Read a few of the comments before you leave. Some of the most thoughtful perspectives come from viewers who have followed this case from the very beginning, and respectful discussions often help all of us think about the evidence more carefully. Finally, if this is your first time here, I hope you'll consider joining our growing community. If you're someone who believes families deserve careful reporting instead of sensational headlines, then I hope you'll join this community today. Every subscriber helps us continue producing long-form investigations like this one, where we slow down, separate verified facts from speculation, and follow these stories until answers finally come. If that's important to you, subscribe before you leave. I'd truly love to have you with us for the next chapter. Thank you for spending part of your day with me. Most of all, thank you for choosing thoughtful discussion over quick conclusions. As always, we'll continue following the Nolan Wells investigation closely, and when verified developments emerge, we'll be here to examine them together. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and never lose sight of the importance of seeking truth with patience, compassion, and respect.